Can food be used as a vehicle to strengthen our identity? I am the first daughter in a family of 6 children. My parents were Efik, a tribe in Calabar, southeast of Nigeria, where the women are noted for their culinary skills. As the first girl, my relationship with food had to start quite early. And so at the age of 8, I was already helping my mom perform simple chores in the kitchen, like pounding crayfish, washing up the mortar and pestle that have been used in pounding yam, and picking stones from beans. That last one was the one I hated most. And I believe a lot of children hated that. But my situation was compounded by the fact that my mother would insist on measuring out 10 cups of beans onto that enamel tray for me to pick. It was a nightmare. Now, my mom's kitchen philosophy is that, or was that, her children, both male and female, should take part in the preparation of food. But the responsibility of taking charge of that kitchen chores rested on me as a first girl. So, of course, it meant that I had to sit with my mother for the most part anytime she was in the kitchen. My mother's cooking instructions, her techniques, and the way she married ingredients, coupled with the final outcome from that kitchen onto the dining table, the conversations I had with my parents and my siblings are all experiences that have shaped my cooking and my eating habit and the way I relate to food as a Nigerian. It is from these interactions that I learned how to eat okra soup and pounded yam with my hands without having the slime stain my white shirt. I tell you, eating okra soup is an art.
Unlike my mom, I haven't quite mastered the artistry of eating okra without staining my blouse. I don't even wear white when I'm eating. My kitchen experience started when I was 6, by her mother, actually, my grandmother. My grandmother used to make me come into the kitchen. Well, like my mom said, her kitchen philosophy was everybody needed to be in the kitchen. But my brother always managed to escape to play soccer. You know how guys are. But my grandmother would make me pound okra to make otong soup. Otong soup is an okra soup where I'm from. And she'd make me do all these kitchen chores that I really didn't like. But when my mom, this mostly happened when my mom was at work, but when my mom would come back from work, my mom would say, oh, you can push the knob on the blender to blend the okra. Fun, right? She would also say you could turn the knob on the mixer to make the chin-chin. So she made my kitchen experience obviously more enjoyable. I think as the first daughter, you're always assumed to be the second mother in case your mom is not available. And so the knowledge transfer happens, whether from your grandmother, whether from your mother. And so this was my first introduction to culture, Nigerian food culture.
The family plays a very key role in passing on cultural elements from one generation to the other. I would also like to say that in that she spoke about, we see already a shift in 2 generations. One generation pounding okra in a mortar, and another generation using the food blender. Now, talking about shift, I remember Christmas Day growing up. It was the men in the family that would slaughter and dress the chicken and goats, and the women were the ones that did the cooking. Now, fast forward to my time, I simply sometimes go for store-bought or market-bought meat, already slaughtered and dressed, frozen sometimes, by the way. And some of the times, I simply go for already cooked meat. I order in from food vendors because the wahala of cooking and stressing on Christmas Day, I want to take off my back. And so we start to see a shift taking place there. Unfortunately, what then happens is that the experience of having men by default take part in meal preparation is lost. And so I see that we're losing some parts of our culture this way, certainly from my time.
Are we losing parts of our culture or elements of our culture? Are we losing the essence? So in this case, I'd say the elements of culture would be slaughtering of the animals, right? or the essence, which is togetherness, being in the kitchen together?
Actually, we're losing the elements of our culture. The essence remains the same. Because indeed, what culture means to you is not what culture would mean to your children, that's my grandchildren, depending on what we pass on to them and depending on what their realities are.
I agree with you. I think that even generationally, we could see that there's a shift that's happened with even entertaining. So when my grandparents lived in Aba and they had guests come over, they would offer them palm wine and kola nut, right? When you and daddy were entertaining, you would offer malt, beer, peanuts. If the guest stayed a little longer, pepper soup, go home. But fast forward to my time, whatever I have in my fridge, if I have anything at all, is what I give to them. Now, sometimes we get a bit possessive about, culture and the elements of the culture. In this case, someone may say, oh, palm wine and kola nuts, gone from our culture, we're losing it. But I like to think that the essence in this case is hospitality. So I think, yes, elements of culture are changing, but at its core, I don't believe culture is changing.
Okay, I think at this point, let's define culture. I would like to say that culture is a way a group of people are connected through their language, their habits, their rituals, and their norms. And actually, culture helps to define and differentiate us. But I should also say that in our ever-changing world, impacted by globalization and the migration of people from one place to the other, including those of us that have jackpot, it becomes difficult to remain static and hold back the cultural evolution or the train of that cultural evolution taking place. And so it becomes necessary that we should be conscious enough to preserve our culture through the generations.
I agree with you, and I like to look at culture in the form of a tree, right? So if I use a tree as a framework to look at culture, where culture is at the roots, the branches of expression are how we live, how we love, how we play, how we work, how we die. And the entry points into the culture being the fruits, where you have food, fashion, music, literary works, dance, movies. Now, if I take how we play, for example, think about weddings and the big effects that food has in weddings. That's the expression of culture in that case. Now, let me break down food culture a little bit, where I use food culture using the same framework as a tree, food culture being at the roots, and how we express becoming the dishes, the ingredients, the techniques we use, and still the entry points being literary works, movies, and music. We start to see that even within that, there's a change in culture. Now, let me take dishes, for example. Now, growing up, and I think I could speak for majority of the people in this room, growing up, jollof rice was different. Now, you can't go into any fast food and see regular jollof rice. It has to be smoky jollof rice. When I was growing up, jollof rice had carrots, green peas, sweet corn. Now, maybe because of consumer preference or because of economics, all of that has disappeared. So we start to see, even within that, elements of the dishes are changing.
Yeah. Let's talk about the technique now. As we move into the convenience economy, where lifestyles have changed, and people are looking for fast and easy way of sourcing, preparing, and consuming food, we tend to go into a situation where we might just build out new habits that may be perceived as eroding culture. A technique like pounding yam with a food processor, all you do is you simply put your cooked yam in the food processor, and 2 minutes, your pounded yam is ready. Or if you're using yam flour, you make a paste, put that on the fire, 2 minutes, your poundo yam is ready. This is completely different from pounded yam, as we did it in the mortar. So the big question is, how do we preserve our culture through food? And is it even possible to preserve the essence of our culture through food? The documentation of our story, of our food culture, has to be done across several channels. And talking about that, it is not just up to us, the food bloggers or the chefs or the food writers. It is up to all of us, the journalists, the movie producer, the music artist. We all have platforms that we can use to tell our authentic stories. Now, thinking of literary work, think of the story of the New Yam Festival. in the story of, as told by Chinua Achebe in Things Fall Apart. Or using music, think of a gentleman called Bright Chimezie, a high life musician. He says in 1974, he took ogbono soup and eba to the UK. And he was almost arrested by the police for swallowing big balls of eba. Well, not to forget the amazing work that Nigerian-owned restaurants are doing both home and abroad, as they continue to provide a sensory space for people to have a first hand in trying out our food culture. We have to be intentional about documenting the essence and the elements of our culture as we capture a snapshot in time to help us identify, what our identities are, what it was, what it is, and what we anticipate it to be.
And to preserve our culture through an identity, through our culture, we have to keep telling stories. Like my mom said, every one of us is a storyteller. And with the stories we tell, we'll strengthen our culture and strengthen the bond to our culture, to our home, and to our hearts.
Thank you.